you feel like your musical writing influenced your writing for thrillers or even your young adult writing?
Well, I mean, in so much as it's a collaborative, the production of music is a collaborative effort. The fun thing about writing music is, although I have done it a lot with other people, of the 300 songs I've written, probably 250 of them are just me in a little room. And there's something wonderful about that, as opposed to a book where it's thrown out to all these people and everybody has an opinion and everybody thinks you've done something wrong. The fun thing about writing music is you write a song and you go out and perform it, you get a feel for whether people like it or not. If they don't like it, you dump it, you don't really rewrite it and go write another one. But the beauty of music has really been the ability to sort of do that alone and have fun.
And music permeates into your writing in that
it does.
Your character, Lou Bolt, is also
yeah, many of my characters are either aficionados or certainly appreciators of music, and I write to music a lot. I write to Philip Glass most of the time, but that's sort of the degree of my concentration. But in the early days, especially writing Bolt, I wrote to jazz a lot, as I know Mike Connolly does with Bosch. There's something, you know, that is both wonderful about writing to music and very distracting about writing to music, so I go back and forth. But if I know a piece very well, then I like to write to it. If I don't know it very well, like I was on a Taylor Swift kick for about 2 years, and once I got to know her music really well, I could write to it, but when I didn't, I would just sit there and sort of study it, so, you know, that's my problem.
And Bolt is a pianist.
Yep, Lou Bolt in the Lou Bolt Daphne Matthews series is a jazz pianist, which is something I wish I could be.
And he also likes the sax, but you play the guitar. So what?
I played the sax and the guitar and a little bit of piano, but I'm not very good at any of them.
So you gave those traits to him?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think that's the joy of fiction, is somebody can be really good at something you're not very good at. Like sex.
So, Lou Bolt.
Sax, I'm sorry, yeah.
Lou Bolt, you had 9 novels until In Harm's Way came out, and he joined Walt Fleming this time. But Lou Bolt is primarily set in Seattle, and yes. You made your first connections with law enforcement in Seattle. How did that come about?
I did. I mean, I'm often asked, you know, how do I go about making connections with law enforcement? Well, they all have departments. They have public, Public Information Officer, PIO. And all of these guys or gals are people who have been on the job and might have, you know, like the first guy I spoke to had his knee shot out, and he was literally just recovering, so they put him over in PIO. But I got very lucky and got inroads with the FBI and with a forensic psychiatrist and a pathologist and on over in the Seattle area, based off of a very quick early interview with the FBI that didn't go more than 15 minutes. But when I published the book, I thanked him profusely at the beginning, and I sent him 5 signed copies, and the next time I called it was Ridley, you know. And he let me interview him for 2 hours and took out folders and said, do you need some, you know, and my network began to expand simply for thanking him in the book. And so Seattle became this, I did not intend for the Bolt series to be a series. I thought it was a standalone book, but as events happened, it became a series, and I had these great contacts, so I continued to exploit them. And actually, I always feel a little guilty about that because I'm paid pretty well for the books, and I go out and basically just pick people's minds and then relay that all to you as readers, and I get paid and they don't. But I did have one instance where in writing a Bolt book, some of my research was then used by real police, and they ended up catching a killer using my research. And they've gone on now and used it 3 times to solve real homicides. So there's been some sort of give and take, and that eventually got me into a position where I was, I don't know if you recall the Washington Sniper. There was a guy who was shooting completely innocent people, and I ended up on a task force with the FBI trying to track down the Washington Sniper. So I've had some sort of really wild, real-life experiences just because of the fiction. And I hear this ringing, so now I have to mess with my own mic. So I'll be right back.
And while he's messing with that, I'll just mention that while most of us sit in a traffic jam and swear or maybe listen to music or whatever, Ridley's calling the Washington police to offer up suggestions.
That was that case. I was invited to the National Book Festival, I think in its first year, which is just an amazing thing because you get, as a result of that, you get an invitation to the White House. So the only time I've ever brought my wife on many of these things, she said, well, can I go? And so we got to go to the White House. It was a great thing. But I got off the plane and was being picked up. And the traffic was on the highway was completely dead stopped. And we found out in short order that we were in a lockdown by police who were searching for the sniper. And my wife has a very dry sense of humor. And she was reading a newspaper or a book in the car next to me. And she said, come on, crime is your thing, why don't you solve that case? And I had all this time sitting in the back of this car, stuck because of the Washington sniper, so I put my mind to it, and I thought of an idea to trap this guy. And I happened to know the chief of police because of my books in Washington, and so I called him. A guy named Terry Gaynor was the chief of the Capitol Police, and he's now Sergeant at Arms in Congress. And I said, Terry, you know, I might have a way to catch this guy. And I went through it with him, and he said, whoa, let me pass you to one of my lieutenants. And I gave it to him, and he liked it a lot, and took it to the FBI, and they liked it a lot. And so for the next 2 weeks, I was in and out of emails and conversation with this task force, trying to throw out ideas on how this all might work. And in fact, they used some of my things and pursued some individuals. They weren't the right guys. So I don't think I had any effect at all in the case, but it was a lot of fun to be part of it. They did use that same research in trapping some arsonists in Baltimore about 3 months later, and now it's become pretty ubiquitous. They use it pretty much across the board, but at that time it was sort of an unknown technology, and it was a lot of fun to be part of it.
Now, your research has also resulted in your family growing.
Yeah, I mean, for part of the Bolt books, I was looking into illegal immigration. And another book, I looked into illegal adoption, finding out that a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, you know, Caucasian child, this was maybe 12, 15 years ago, in the United States, could be bought on the black market for $50,000. And I was, you know, pretty amazed at that whole thing. So I wrote a book about that called The Pied Piper. And in doing that, I discovered the whole problem with and need in China at the time of a lot of young girls, 40,000 a year, who wouldn't have a home. They would just be moved to a higher level in an orphanage, a higher floor every 3 years. And my wife and I were considering trying for a second child, and we decided let's adopt a child, and we ended up adopting a child from China who turned 12 years old about 2 weeks ago. So, you know, the books, I heard earlier, it was funny because somebody asked about emotionally, do your private lives end up in your books? And I think really the whole panel basically said no. And I was in the back because you know, and that's great. I must be a softie because they absolutely end up in my books. I find that if I'm in a, you know, fight with my wife, or if I'm ticked off at the kids, or, you know, I'm suspicious of the guy working on our pool or something like that, all of that stuff ends up in my books. I can't keep that stuff that's in me out of them. And they often end up as themes of a future book, or, you know, currently some sort of angst I'm going through, or whether, for instance, I'll give you some for instances. How do I talk so long, so just shut me up. But